All right, Sugar Bowl right around the corner in New Orleans. Number three, Texas taking on number two, Washington. We've got you covered here at the Horns 24/7 game preview. Thanks for being here with us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Tommy Yarrish here, alongside what some may call the mayor of Austin, Texas, with a fancy new backdrop there in New Orleans, Mr. Chip Brown. Chip, appreciate you being here with us. Let's go ahead and talk about this matchup a little bit numbers wise to start us off. This is a rematch of last year's Alamo Bowl. We've said that a million times. Washington beat Texas 27-20 in that game. Fast forward to this year. The Longhorns, right now, the number four rushing defense in yards per game, number 13 in points per games allowed defensively, and number 23 in yards per game allowed as well. Washington, on the flip side, number one passing offense in college football, third in 20 plus yard plays on the season, and number 11 in points per game. Chip, before we get to the actual game, some early fireworks already down there in the media sessions on Thursday. Michael Penix and Dylan Johnson having some things to say about Texas's defense. We've seen in the past in games like Iowa State where necessarily quote unquote bulletin board material tends to work really well for Texas and not as well for their opponents. What did you make of what happened on Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, it was fun, it was spirited, it did not disappoint. You've got, Washington's number 1 ranked passing offense, explosive offense with their Joe Moore award-winning offensive line going up against Texas's monstrous defensive line anchored by 2023 Outland Trophy winner Tavondre Sweat and Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year Byron Murphy. And Sweat and Murphy actually went first in the media sessions, and they were asked about Washington's offensive line, and Tavondre Sweat said they're just another offensive line to me, and that kind of got some reporters to say, well, they did win the Joe Moore Award, and Tavondre Sweat said, well, I won awards too, but now they got to face us, and we'll see how it goes down on Monday night in the Sugar Bowl. And then Washington's offensive players talked to the media later in the afternoon. They were asked about going up against Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, and Michael Penix, the feisty Washington Heisman Trophy finalist at quarterback, said, they play good ball, but it's not like we're going up against the 49ers D-line or the Eagles D-line, so we'll be good. And Dylan Johnson, Washington's 1,000-yard rusher, who transferred from Mississippi State, said, I've played in the SEC. I faced Bama and Georgia and LSU. This is nothing new to me. I'm ready for it. So this is the kind of stuff you want. It's good banter between teams with a lot on the line in this Sugar Bowl, obviously as a college football playoff semifinal.
Yeah, I think you could say that there's bulletin board material for both sides after Thursday's media conference, and that just never disappoints. That's exactly what you want heading into a game of this magnitude. It just makes things so much more exciting. Let's talk about the game itself now. You mentioned Washington's offensive line winning the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line unit in the country. They have to go up against Texas's defensive line, which you and I have said for most of the season. We think Texas has the best defensive tackle pairing in the country in Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. I talked about it in the mailbag earlier this week, Chip. I think this is where your ball game is won. Whoever wins this battle more than likely wins the game, in my opinion. Do you see it that way? And if you do, who has the edge when you look at this game from afar on Monday?
Well, I think it's fascinating. Obviously, I think that Texas's run defense, obviously anchored by Sweat and Murphy, is going to make life difficult for Dylan Johnson and the Washington Huskies running game. But I thought it was interesting that Washington offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb said that the key to slowing down Sweat and Murphy will be tiring them out, not only blocking them and making sure there are bodies on them at all times, but moving them around. And that's something that Washington likes to do. They like to roll the pocket. They like to move Michael Penix around, and they're going to basically make Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy chase Michael Penix. And then don't be surprised if when Tavondre Sweat and or Byron Murphy are out of the game, that Washington maybe goes tempo to try to take advantage of having them out of the game and making it where Texas can't substitute. So that's part of it. I'm very eager to see how all that plays out, but I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, this could be a legacy game for Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy if they can get pressure on Michael Penix, because the difference between getting pressure on Michael Penix with 4 and blitzing him with 5 is dramatically different. He's very good against the blitz. He knows where the blitzer is coming from. He finds his hot routes and he gets the ball out. When you're able to get pressure on him with 4 and maybe get him off his spot, his completion percentage drops dramatically below 50%. And that's where you want Michael Penix. And so this is going to be a big time test of Texas, one of the best, teams in FBS in terms of quarterback pressures this season. Barron Sorrell is in on that. I mean, obviously, Byron Murphy has the most quarterback pressures with 40. Barron Sorrell's next. He needs to have a big game. Ethan Burke, you name it. Alfred Collins. They all have to be on their game tonight, Monday night, because Michael Penix is special. We know that. He's a Heisman Trophy finalist for a reason. You take away the running game, he can still beat you. He's comfortable in a throw first offense, and that's where this is going to require a totally coordinated defensive effort from Texas to slow these guys down, because they have 2,000-yard receivers and Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk. Odunze is the best of that bunch. Number one, you've got to you've got to control him as best you can and take your chances on, Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan. But Texas needs to be aggressive, Tommy, and I'm sure that's where we're headed next.
That is exactly where we're headed next. We talk about the battle, at the line of scrimmage between the offensive line and defensive line. But even when you drop it back on that same side of the ball, when Washington's on offense and Texas is on defense, the Longhorns 93rd in the country in passing yards allowed. Washington, the number 1 passing offense in America. Chip, we've talked a lot about the secondary being kind of a thorn in the side of this Texas defense this season. Thorne goes a little bit deeper in that first half with freshman safety Derek Williams having to sit out. Remember, he had that targeting call in the second half of the Big 12 championship game, so he has to sit out the first half. Jalen Catalon no longer on the team. They've lost a couple other guys to the portal. How do the Longhorns not just slow down Michael Penix, but take away the big plays? Because this is a Washington offense that has 83 plays of 20 or more yards. How do you trust your secondary to play what, Chip, if they shut down Michael Penix, would be the best game they've played all season?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be physical with their receivers. You just have to. And I think that's the way that Texas DBs like to play. I mean, Terrence Brooks, Malik Muhammad, Ryan Watts, they like to be up on the line. And honestly, I think no one's really done that to Washington this year. That's what's crazy is the amount of respect that people show these Washington receivers, and with good reason. I mean, Rome Odunze is going to be a big-time player in the NFL. But you've got to try to disrupt them and get them off their route just ever so slightly, because that little bit of alteration to the receivers getting into their routes is the difference between the pass rush getting to Michael Penix and not getting to Michael Penix. And if he gets into a rhythm and gets hot, we know he can roll you off the field. We saw that last year in the Alamo Bowl. Although, Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk didn't go over 100 yards receiving in that victory by Washington, they were able to move the ball down the field and just stay ahead of Texas really throughout that game. So Texas needs to be aggressive on the outside with these receivers. And I've said kind of all week going into this game, If you're Texas, you'd rather die on your shield than die on your knees. And if you're playing off coverage and trying to keep things in front of you, you're dying on your knees instead of, being aggressive, going after these guys, being physical, setting the tone. That's what this Texas defense has been good at all year. It's when they've gone into lead protection mode, played off coverage, tried to keep things in front of them, where they've given up 20-point leads to Houston and K-State and TCU. They have to stay aggressive in this game, especially the corners on the outside.
Chip, so much attention in this game going to Washington's offense against Texas's defense, but I feel like we have to touch on the flip side here just a little bit. Texas's offense against Washington's defense. This is a Washington defensive unit that is 120th in FBS in passing yards allowed per game. I think you could say that Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns have played their best ball on the offensive side of the ball in their last two games against Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. Steve Sarkisian's one of the best play callers in college football. It seems like everything is rolling. They have some time to get healthy, so guys like Quinn Ewers with his AC joint sprain in his shoulder, Xavier Worthy, who was banged up in the Big 12 title game, Jatavian Sanders, who's been dealing with stuff all season. You get all those guys healthy, and you're coming into this game fresh. How important is that for this Texas offense, and how much of a factor do you think that plays into this as well?
Oh, it's big. I mean, it's big. And look, Texas is built for a shootout. The Texas defense doesn't want that to be the case, but they are built for a shootout because Quinn Ewers and the weapons that he has around him. You just mentioned, Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, J.T. Sanders, and the Texas running game. Remember, a year ago in the Alamo Bowl, Texas didn't even try to establish the run. Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson were opt-outs. Texas only ran the ball 18 times for 51 yards. It was not part of the game plan. It will be a big part of the game plan for Texas. Even after Jonathan Brooks goes down with the season-ending injury, Texas has run the ball more in the last three games. They've gone from averaging, 27 carries per game to 30, from 187 yards rushing per game to over 200. So CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue, Keelan Robinson have done a great job of maintaining the Texas running game. And it needs to be a big factor in this game to, melt the clock, keep Washington's offense off the field. The masterpiece game this season for Texas was against Kansas when they ran it over 50 times, totally dominated the time of possession, 40 minutes. Kansas only had the ball 20 minutes. Texas won that game going away 40-14. I'm not saying that it's going to be like that because obviously Michael Penix Jr. and these receivers are a different breed, but you can't show them too much respect. And for the Texas offense, Quinn Ewers needs to be at his big game hunter best. He's the one who came up with the John Wick mentality. I called him the big game hunter in this past week's Insider. Because he's played his best in the biggest moments against Alabama, against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title game. And he needs to do it again because it's going to take that kind of effort from everyone on the Texas sideline. And for the Texas offense, you've got to target Elijah Jackson. He is the weak link in that Washington secondary. And he's the guy you go after every time. He's the guy that'll give up the big play. And so keep an eye on that.
And Texas certainly has the weapons to do just that offensively. It seems like every single aspect of this game that we've talked about so far, the margins are just so thin, and this game is just as close as it can be, really. I know Texas is a little bit more of a heavy favorite on the betting lines, but when you look at it on paper, things balance out rather evenly. So for you, Chip, what is it that is the straw in the camel's back? What to you determines this game?
Well, special teams is going to have to play a factor in this game. Last year, Washington had a blocked punt. They blocked a Texas punt in the Alamo Bowl. Texas certainly can't afford to have that happen again. And if there's a big play special teams wise, Texas needs that to go in their favor, whether it's a Xavier Worthy punt return, a a Keelan Robinson kick return, a blocked punt by the Longhorns, or just a special game punting the ball by Ryan Sanborn and Bert Auburn. Look, Grady Gross, the kicker for Washington, his longest field goal attempt is 47 yards this season. He's got about the same, success rate in kicking field goals as Bert Auburn, but Bert Auburn's booted, 50 plus. He's got a 54-yard field goal. That's something to think about when it's a matter of, do you take the points? Do you go for it on fourth down? I've said I like taking the points. Look, they kicked 5 field goals against Texas Tech and beat them 57-7. Nothing wrong with kicking field goals early in the game, getting points on the board. Bert Auburn, he's made 19 of his last 20. I blame that last miss in the Big 12 title game on Sark for not taking the time out to settle things down right before the half. But this could be a Bert Auburn game. We've seen him deliver big for Texas. Certainly the game winner, 42-yarder against K-State in overtime. It could come down to that for Texas in this game. And look, Bert Auburn's been really good.
Well, what it comes down to is a good segue into our final and everyone's favorite segment of this game preview, game predictions. Chip, yours first.
Okay, well, I've said this is going to be a field goal game either way because you got really great competitors in this game. I mean, Michael Penix in this Washington Huskies team, 11-0 in one-score games under Kalen DeBoer, 9-0 against ranked opponents. They are grimy, gritty, tough. So is Texas. I mean, look, Quinn Ewers is a dog. He's a big game hunter. This is going to be a fight to the end, and I'm going to go with the Longhorns. Bert Auburn delivering big, 30-27, Texas, moving on to the national championship game. Tommy?
Chip, I have really liked this Washington team since the start of the season. I think Michael Penix Jr. is not only a great story in college football, but he has been fantastic. And I don't have a Heisman vote, and this is no disrespect to Jaden Daniels, but he would have gotten my Heisman vote. I think they've got the best receiving core in college football. Odunze, McMillan, and Polk. And Kalen DeBoer is a phenomenal coach. So there's a lot to like. And on the defense side of the ball, Jabbar Muhammad has really flashed for me at corner as well for this Washington team. I thought going into the Pac-12 championship game, there was no way that Oregon should have been favored by as much as they were. And Washington proved me right. That said, Texas has everything that they would need to land those counter punches. A lot of this season I've talked about punch and counter punch in some of these games for the Longhorns, and every time that they've been punched, they've found a way to find a counter punch. I think this comes down to time of possession, really, and I talked about this a little bit on the mailbag. I think back to Alabama, which is the toughest opponent that Texas has faced this season. Washington is going to be the next toughest, I think, and at the end of the game, the Longhorns just hold on to the ball there at the end to just milk the clock and win it. I think there might be a similar situation here in this one. And I think that if Texas is able to do that, keeping Michael Penix Jr. off the field, keeping the Washington offense off the field, things get a little bit easier. But I do think this is still close. Chip, I'm right there with you. I have this as a field goal game, but I also have the Longhorns winning it 34-31. And quite frankly, what could be the game of the year.
I like it. Let's go.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us here on the Horns 24/7 game preview. Super excited to bring you some more coverage here in the coming days from New Orleans, all leading up to that late kickoff on New Year's Day, Texas against Washington for a trip to Houston and the national championship game. Thanks for joining us here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Appreciate you all being here with us. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you're the first to know when new content heads your way. For the great Chip Brown and the rest of the crew out in New Orleans, I'm Tommy Yarrish. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.